Somebody help! He's not breathing! The lion's on him! Oh my God!
The voice came from a frantic security guard, breathless and shaking, as the camera on his phone caught the impossible. In the middle of a luxurious desert courtyard, surrounded by sandstone arches and gold-plated fountains, lay a man covered in blood. Not just any man. Omar Al-Mansour, one of the wealthiest and most well-known men in the United Arab Emirates. And the creature hovering over his lifeless body wasn't a thief or an assassin. It was his lion, Azrak, the massive male. Lion Omar had raised from a cub, was pacing in circles. His golden mane was stained red. He roared again, long, low, and terrifying, sending house staff and party guests scattering in every direction. The video went viral before the authorities even arrived. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a moment no one could believe. One of the most powerful men in the region, ripped apart by the very animal he treated like a son. But to understand how something like this could happen, we need to go back to where it all started. Because this wasn't just a story about a man and a lion, it was a story about love, pride, denial, and a terrifying truth about the wild that too many people ignore. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to Animal Story, where we bring you the most powerful real-life animal tales from around the world. These aren't just stories about animals. They're stories about people, consequences, and the thin line between nature and control. Hit that button, and let's continue. The call came in at 5:47 p.m. local time. A security team at Omar's private estate outside Abu Dhabi reported a violent animal attack involving a lion. First responders thought it was a hoax, some exaggeration from a frightened tourist. After all, who keeps lions roaming free on their property? But when paramedics arrived, they didn't find an exaggeration. They found a scene out of a nightmare. Omar's body was face down near the marble fountain he had installed to resemble Roman architecture. His white kandura was torn to shreds. His neck, well, it was too graphic to describe on the air. Let's just say the lion had gone for the kill. Dozens of guests had been there for a private birthday gathering. There were streamers still hanging, plates of untouched food. Live musicians had dropped their instruments and fled. The courtyard was scattered with gold-trimmed cushions, half-empty champagne bottles, and abandoned phones. All of it frozen in time around the horror in the center. No one knew what triggered it. Some said the lion had been acting strange all week. Others believed the fireworks at the party startled it. One of Omar's aides claimed he'd seen the lion licking Omar's hand earlier that day after the billionaire got a paper cut while opening a gift. But nobody, not even those closest to him, imagined that Azrak, who had been raised like a royal pet, would ever turn violent. And that's what made it so chilling. See, Omar wasn't just a lion owner. He was famous for it. International magazines had photographed him lounging beside Azrak by the pool. He once posted a video brushing the lion's teeth, joking that Azrak has better dental care than most humans. For years, people marveled at how gentle the beast seemed. Omar claimed their bond was spiritual. So how does a spiritual bond turn into a fatal attack? That's where the story takes a darker turn. And it's where we'll go next. Because what happened that evening wasn't a freak accident. There had been signs, warnings, behavior that was brushed off as stress, heat, or coincidence. People around Omar tried to tell him. But like many who loved too deeply, he believed love was enough. He was wrong. And now, the world would never look at exotic animal ownership the same way again. Omar Al-Mansour wasn't born into hardship. He came from oil money, old money, the kind that could buy skyscrapers, islands, or silence. But money, as it turns out, can't buy immunity from grief. He was 46 when he died. And just 6 years before that, he was a different man. One that smiled more, joked more, and still believed in the future. But everything changed the day his youngest son, Karim, passed away from leukemia at just 9 years old. Omar was never the same after that. Friends said he withdrew from business meetings. He stopped going to family events. His once flashy Instagram page, filled with photos of designer watches and yacht parties, went silent. Until one day, it didn't. The photo that broke the silence was of a tiny lion cub wrapped in a blue blanket, its eyes still cloudy with infancy. The caption read, "Meet Azrak. He's my son now." What the world didn't know was that Azrak had been rescued from an illegal wildlife trade bust on the Bai. Omani border. The cub was malnourished, barely surviving. Omar pulled strings, made a quiet donation to a local wildlife officer's family, and adopted the lion before anyone could say no. At first, his friends were baffled. But as they watched Omar bottle feed the cub, clean its paws, and carry it in his arms like a newborn, something clicked. They weren't watching a billionaire flaunting another exotic pet. They were watching a father trying to fill a crater of pain he didn't know how else to manage. To Omar, Azrak wasn't just a lion, he was therapy. By the time Azrak was 6 months old, he was walking freely around the estate, chewing on plush toys, napping in sun-drenched rooms. Omar hired top animal behaviorists and a private vet from South Africa. The lion had his own temperature-controlled room, dietitians, even a personal trainer. No expense was spared. And then the videos started. First, it was a casual clip of Omar, lying on a couch while Azrak curled at his feet like a house cat. Then came the brushing routines, the poolside cuddles, the roar and repeat games where the lion would mimic sounds Omar made. Within weeks, the videos had millions of views. People were hooked. They weren't just watching a lion. They were watching the healing of a man who had lost everything and found something wild to love. "He doesn't replace Karim," Omar said once during an interview with a Dubai lifestyle channel. "But he brings silence back into my nights." Locals began calling him the Lion Father. Children showed up at his gates hoping to catch a glimpse of Azrak. Animal lovers sent letters begging him to open the estate as a sanctuary, but Omar refused. Azrak is not a show. He's family. What's tragic is that some of those closest to him warned him. His sister Layla once said in an interview, he was pouring human love into an animal that wasn't made to receive it the same way. But Omar would only smile. "Azrak understands me better than most people," he'd reply. In truth, their bond was extraordinary but deeply flawed. Omar believed that if you raised a lion with love, it would love you back like a son. He believed in loyalty, emotional reciprocity, and unbreakable connection. He believed love could rewrite instinct, and for a long time, it looked like he was right. Until one day, love wasn't enough, because even the most powerful bond in the world cannot tame nature itself. And Azrak, though he had shared meals, memories, and even mourning with Omar, was still in his bones a lion. In the next part, we'll explore the subtle signs, ignored and dismissed, that whispered the truth before it screamed. For a long time, it all seemed perfect. Azrak grew from a fragile cub into a majestic 400-pound predator with a golden mane that shimmered in the desert sun. Omar was never far from him. They walked the property together, posed for photos, and even slept in the same room most nights. To the outside world, it was a miracle. But to those who were there behind the gates, the cracks were starting to show. It began with the growls, low, rumbling sounds Azrak made whenever someone else got too close to Omar. At first, it seemed like a form of protection, but over time, even longtime staff members, people Azrak had known since he was a cub, were no longer welcome near Omar. Then came the broken things, ripped pillows, shredded rugs, glass vases knocked over in fits of aggression. Omar brushed it off. "He's just playful," he'd say, "like a big toddler." But lions aren't toddlers. and their version of a tantrum can draw blood. One afternoon, a trainer, brought in from Johannesburg, watched Azraq's movements and quietly suggested separating the lion for a few hours each day. "He's becoming dominant," he warned. "He's not acting like a pet. He's testing the limits." Omar fired him the next morning. Another time, during a visit from Omar's nephew, Azraq lunged when the boy ran toward his uncle with a toy sword. It didn't reach the child, but it was close enough to knock the toy out of his hand. The family left early and didn't come back. Omar refused to see the signs. He told people, "Azraq senses energy. He knows who to trust." He was just startled. But there was no denying it. The lion had changed. He'd started to stare more often, not just at strangers, but at Omar. Long, still moments of eye contact. It didn't seem aggressive, but it wasn't affectionate either. More like something calculating, watchful. Layla, Omar's sister, noticed it one evening during dinner. "He doesn't blink anymore when he looks at you," she whispered. Omar just laughed. "That's his way of saying I'm listening." Even the lion's eating habits changed. He refused certain cuts of meat, grew agitated during feeding time. One worker claimed he once saw Azraq walk away from a full bowl of food, only to crouch near the living room couch, watching Omar nap for over an hour without moving. Still, Omar didn't waver. In fact, he doubled down. He got rid of the steel barrier around the lion's sleeping area, said it made Azraq feel like a prisoner. He stopped scheduling private training sessions. "He knows who I am," Omar told a journalist. "He doesn't need to be trained like some circus act." But one choice, more than any other, sealed his fate. For his birthday, Omar planned to let Azraq roam freely among the guests. No barriers, no leashes, just open space, music, and a crowd of people laughing, clinking glasses, and watching in awe as a full-grown lion strolled through the party like a royal. Everyone tried to talk him out of it. His head of security, his sister, even the private vet, who issued a written warning. Azraq is now fully mature. This environment is no longer safe. Omar tore it in half. "He's never hurt me," he said. "He never will." He believed that. With everything in him, he believed that. But belief isn't stronger than instinct, and lions don't send warnings twice. It was supposed to be a celebration. Omar Al-Mansour's 46th birthday had all the luxury you'd expect from one of the richest men in the Middle East. Crystal chandeliers, hanging from custom-built arches, imported Moroccan tile fountains, platters of lamb and saffron rice, violinists flown in from Vienna, and a guest list filled with influencers, diplomats, and billionaires' children. But none of that would be what people remembered. What they would never forget, what would play again and again across the internet in blurry, horrifying clips, was what happened just after sunset. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden glow over the courtyard. A waiter opened the gates to the garden, and Azraq stepped out, as planned. He was magnificent. The lion walked calmly past tables and flower arrangements, his mane moving gently in the warm desert breeze. Guests applauded. Some pulled out their phones. Omar stood proudly, arms folded, watching the lion as if he were presenting a son at a royal ceremony. For a moment, it was breathtaking. And then something shifted. No one noticed exactly what set it off. Some said it was the burst of a champagne cork. Others believed it was the sudden flutter of a waiter's scarf. But whatever it was, it made Azraq freeze. His ears flattened, his tail stiffened. He turned his head slowly toward the center of the courtyard, toward Omar, and then he charged. It didn't look real at first. Some guests thought it was part of the show. But Omar's expression said otherwise. He barely had time to react. Azraq knocked him to the ground in one brutal movement. The roar was deafening. Omar's body hit the tile with a sickening crack, and then came the sound no one could unhear. A deep growl, followed by a scream that cut through the music like a blade. Blood pooled instantly. Azrak went for Omar's neck. People screamed and scattered. Some dropped their glasses and ran. Others froze in shock. The violinist dropped his instrument and collapsed behind a pillar. A woman live streaming on Instagram shrieked and dropped her phone, capturing only chaos, screams, and the dull thud of panicked footsteps. A security guard ran forward with a tranquilizer dart, but froze when Azrak raised his blood-covered mouth and growled. The lion stood protectively over Omar, tail twitching, eyes wild. It was already too late. By the time paramedics were called, Omar's body wasn't moving. His white robe, once crisp and pristine, was now soaked in red. A housekeeper later said it looked like a wedding turned into a war zone. Authorities were on site within minutes. A sniper from the estate's private security team made the call. He didn't hesitate. When Azrak stepped toward one of the fleeing guests, the shot rang out. The lion dropped instantly. It was over. The estate fell into eerie silence. Glass crunched beneath shoes. Somewhere, a child was crying. A birthday cake sat untouched on a silver tray, candles still flickering in the night breeze. The final image captured by the media was unforgettable. Omar lying still, his hand outstretched toward the lion. Azrak's body crumpled beside him, both surrounded by blood, both motionless. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was betrayal, heartbreak, and a horrifying reminder that love, no matter how deep, cannot erase the wildness written into nature. And now, nothing would ever be the same again. The news broke before sunrise. Lion kills billionaire owner. During private birthday party in UAE, headlined the New York Times. He died, hugging the beast he loved most. Read a viral tweet that racked up over 15 million views by noon. Within hours, Omar Al-Mansour's death had gone global. Not just because he was a wealthy man, but because the story was too surreal to ignore. A billionaire mauled to death by his own pet lion in front of dozens of guests. Videos from the party circulated fast, some of them raw, unedited, filled with panic and screams. Most platforms scrambled to take them down, but the internet had already seen, and they couldn't unsee it. The responses came in waves: grief, disbelief, and outrage. His fans posted old clips of Omar brushing Azrak's mane and whispering to him like a father would to a child. "He didn't just love that lion, he trusted him," one wrote. "This wasn't just a pet. This was his family." But not everyone saw it that way. Animal rights groups weighed in quickly. Organizations like Born Free USA and PETA issued strong statements condemning exotic animal ownership. Azrak was not a monster, one article stated. He was a lion, and lions do what lions are wired to do. Even among the general public, the debate was fierce. Some blamed Omar for romanticizing danger. "He raised a killer and treated it like a house cat," one viral comment read. This was preventable. Others argued he was a victim of his own heart. Don't turn this into a lesson. He gave that lion love. The world is colder without men like him. Talk shows picked it up. Experts were brought in. CNN aired a segment titled, "When Love and Nature Collide, the Fatal Cost of Exotic Pets." Dr. Ellen Reeves, a wildlife psychologist, told Anderson Cooper, "People think love can rewrite instinct. It can't. You can raise a lion in silk sheets, but he'll still remember the wild." Meanwhile, Azrak's death also sparked mourning. Vigils were held, not just for Omar, but for the lion too. Animal lovers lit candles in his memory, painting him not as a villain, but as a victim of captivity. Back in Abu Dhabi, Omar's family stayed silent for days. When they finally released a statement, it read, "Omar loved deeply and lived with passion. He believed in harmony between man and beast. We grieve not only his loss, but the broken bond he shared with Azrak." The funeral was a private affair, but images leaked: white flowers, golden prayer rugs, and a custom painting of Omar and Azraq side by side. Mourners included business, leaders, government officials, and local families who had followed Omar's lion videos for years. A week later, a memorial fund was launched, the Azraq Initiative, an organization aimed at rescuing illegally trafficked wild animals and supporting sanctuaries that prioritize ethical care. It raised over $12 million in its first month, but amid the tears and tributes, a darker conversation emerged, one that questioned the very heart of Omar's legacy. Should anyone be allowed to keep wild animals as pets? Is love ever enough to tame nature? In boardrooms, newsrooms, and social media threads, the story of Omar and Azraq became more than a tragedy. It became a cautionary tale, and in its echo, the world started to change. 6 months after the tragedy, the gates of Omar Al-Mansour's estate remained closed. No more garden parties, no more lion roaming through marble courtyards. The once buzzing compound now sat in eerie silence, fountains turned off, curtains drawn, and the lion's enclosure sealed shut. But beyond those walls, the world hadn't moved on. Omar's story and Azraq's continued to echo around the globe. Public pressure led to rapid change. In the United Arab Emirates, new legislation was passed under the Wildlife Protection and Safety Act, banning the private ownership of all big cats and dangerous exotic animals. Enforcement grew stricter. Licenses were revoked. Animals were seized from private homes and relocated to sanctuaries. Other countries followed suit. In the U.S., a renewed push for the Big Cat Public Safety Act gained momentum. Lawmakers cited Omar's death in their hearings, calling it a wake-up call. But the real impact, the human impact, was deeper, because this wasn't just a story about a man and his lion. This was a story about boundaries, about grief, and about the fatal mistake of confusing love with control. Omar wasn't a monster. He didn't abuse animals. He adored Azraq with a tenderness most people reserve for their own children. But in the end, his love blinded him to a truth so many people ignore. Wild is wild. No matter how soft it seems, in the weeks after his death, old videos of Omar and Azraq resurfaced. One in particular struck a nerve. In it, Omar is sitting on a velvet cushion, Azraq's head resting in his lap. He looks at the camera and smiles. "People say I should be afraid," he says softly. "But fear has no place where there is love." It's a beautiful moment. But now, it feels haunting. Because love isn't always enough. Not when we ignore instinct. Not when we try to rewrite millions of years of evolution with cuddles and conviction. And yet, Omar believed. Fiercely. Fully. Until the very end. Today, the Azraq Initiative continues to honor both of their names. The organization funds sanctuaries, rescues illegally trafficked cubs, and runs education campaigns about responsible animal care. One of their recent billboards reads, "Honor the animal, respect the boundary." In classrooms and documentaries, their story is now taught not as a horror story, but as a heartbreaking lesson. About trust, about misjudgment, about the line we cross when we believe love can conquer instinct. But maybe the most important lesson is for all of us. We live in a world where people want to get closer to the wild, to own it, post it, pet it, control it. But nature wasn't made for cages or clout. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If we truly love something wild, shouldn't we love it enough to let it stay wild? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if this story moved, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Animal Story for more real-life tales that make us question the way we see animals and ourselves.